Welcome to Inside ArtScroll, where the books that we read and the people that write them come to life. It's a great zchus and a wonderful privilege to be joined today in the studio by two amazing people, noted author, Maggid, one of Klal Yisrael's favorites, Rabbi Pesach Krohn.
Thank you.
And Harav Nosson Newman, mechanech par excellence, and in this case, a son of the Halda ben Chaim B'Chaim, the character, the main person that we'll be discussing, and an incredible book that he wrote. The book is called Because He Cared. It was authored by Rabbi Yechiel Spiro, and it's a book that is transformational, and I feel, as someone who's been in the world of chinuch for over 2 decades, should be required reading for every single mechanech and parent. Reb Nosson, I never met your father. I read this book, and I can't begin to tell you how many times I turned the page with a lump in my throat and tears in my eyes. I mean, the chinuch and the love that he had as a principal for every single Talmida is otherworldly. And we'll talk about some practical examples, Be'ezer Hashem, but what was it like growing up as his son in his home?
It's a great question. So we really didn't have any idea what he did. We lived in Borough Park, 1127 45th Street. He always told us he never wanted to live in Queens. He didn't want the Queens people to see his children. But really, that's what he said. But really what he meant was, when he was home, he wanted to be there for his children. He didn't want to mix business and pleasure. I'm not sure which one was business, which one was pleasure, but Mavin Yavin. And when he was home, he was home. Shabbos, and Rabbi Yechiel wrote it, in the early years, we didn't have too many guests. He wanted to devote his time to the kids. My two sisters had no idea. They went, every now and then they were sick or whatever, they made believe, and they went to Beis Yaakov of Queens. And everybody looked at them like they were like in a cage. You're Rabbi Newman's daughters? Wow. And they had no idea what they were talking about. They went to camp. You're Rabbi Newman's daughter? They were Rabbi Newman's daughters for a long time until they chapped the greatness of what he did every single day. So to us, he was Ta. And then as we got older, we chapped more and more what he did. And I had the incredible zechus to work at his side for 15 years, 17 years I was in Beis Yaakov of Queens. Kaminyan Taiv in the Moised that he gave his blood, sweat, and tears, and his life.
Rabbi Krohn, you perhaps bring a different perspective as someone who lived in the community, as a 3-generational connection with the school, as you shared with me. Tell us a little bit about what it was like to be Rabbi Newman's friend, or just have a front row seat to the magic that he was able to work every single day in his school.
The first way that we got a connection with Rabbi Newman was with my younger sister, Esti. When she started Beis Yaakov, she was in the 4th grade. She was in Rabbi Newman's first graduating class of Beis Yaakov. And even then, every day she would come home and she would talk about Rabbi Newman. He was such a fatherly, warm, caring, understanding machanech. So I spoke to her before I came here, and I said, tell me one of the great things that you remember about Rabbi Newman. And she told me this story, which is so brilliant, of a machanech. She said we were in the 4th or 5th grade, and he made us, every kid, learn Al HaMichya by heart. So you might wonder, why Al HaMichya? So he told us, when you're eating a snack, you're on the road. You might not be home. How are you going to bench? If you're washing, you're sitting at a table, so you'll have a sitter. Al HaMichya, it's on the road. You're in the car, you're on a plane, you're in the street, and you eat something, and you eat a piece of cake or whatever, you have to know Al HaMichya. Every kid in 4th or 5th grade, and he tested us over and over and over, and he told us the meaning of the words. And she said, today, of course I know Al HaMichya by heart, but I knew it since the 4th grade. What an insight of a machanech to figure out that a kid is always going to be on the road when he's eating a snack. Amazing. I couldn't get over that.
Rabbi Newman, one of the things that Rabbi Spiro, who writes this book with such eloquence, and he's a master author, he speaks a little bit about just getting from eating, about what lunch was like in Beis Yaakov, Queens. Share with us what your father used to do, what he used to walk around, and why he walked around, and why he made sure to be there by lunch every day.
So he was by lunch every single day. The number one reason that he told me, many times was to make sure that everybody is eating something. You have to eat lunch. He said, I eat lunch every day. He had this little roll with tuna fish for 50 years. I think it was from the Midbar, I don't know, but the same sandwich and an apple. The same lunch every single day. And he used to notice the kids who didn't have school lunch, they couldn't afford it, didn't bring home lunch. He made sure they ate. That was the number one reason that he told me he went. The second reason was interaction with the kids. He used to give, in the early years, he had this little black microphone attached to a box. And that's how he walked around before there was a system. And he would ask questions, and one of his favorite questions, who was the father of Yeshua ben Nun? And the whole bunch of questions, in the book that Reb Yechiel wrote that were his favorite questions, and he interacted with them. Mazel tov to you, Mazel tov, I'm so sorry about your bubby, I'm this. And he got to see every single child, and they got to love him because he was their father and eventually their Zaidi figure. That's why he went to lunch, and he benched with them. Kailisha, okay, yeah, 1960s it was okay, the 70s it was okay, and then I guess we all got Frimmer, but it was fine, it was okay.
I just want to add one thing about his personal connection, what Rabbi Newman mentioned. When my kids were beginning to grow, so I had a minig, I wanted them, every night at supper, I taught them about a mitzvah. So let's say we started with getting married and having children, having a bris, or not eating Gid Anosha. Every night we ate it, and we reviewed back, from the first ones. And so the kids got to know so many mitzvahs. And every morning, when my daughter came in, who's today a 7th grade teacher there, Rabbi Newman, the first thing he would see her, oh, Chaviva, what mitzvah did you learn last night? Now, there's 300, 400 kids in the class, in the school, and he's watching everybody get off the bus. But he stopped her, what mitzvah did you learn last night? That it made it personal. She looked forward to it, to meeting him.
Because he cared.
Because he cared, exactly. It's the greatest title.
There's many, many tidbits in here that each one of them in itself is a Moser Haskell. But one of the things I was blown away by was, and I picture this, and now I'm seeing the picture of his face, if a child was in pain or a child was on the floor and they were crying, he would get down on the floor next to them, eye level, so that he can make them feel better. Did you ever see that, or you just knew about it?
I saw it many times. And he was older. I started working with him when he was 65. And I was Zeich, and I once was walking on the second floor, and he was sitting leaning against a wall, talking to a 3rd grader or a 2nd grader, I'm not sure. I said, Rabbi Newman, everything okay? Yeah, don't worry, we're schmoozing. And I walked away, and it wasn't so easy to get up at 65. It's a little harder. He was able to do it. And I saw him after lunch. I said, Tom, why don't you bring a chair? He goes, this is so much more geschmack. This is so much better. Eye to eye. I saw it with my own eyes a number of times. Not a lot of times, but a number of times. What a reishim, what an incredible impression.
Rabbi Spiro told me that after writing that, not long after that, he had a student who had a complete meltdown in the school and was lying there on the floor, just totally shot. And all of a sudden this hit him, and he got down on the floor next to this Talmud, and he says, I wrote a book about Rabbi Newman. Now I have a chance to actually be like Rabbi Newman.
But he knew when. He knew when to sit down, which leads me to an incredible story. My second day on the job in September 1995, and it's in the book, I get a phone call. Rabbi Nassim, a girl fell down a flight of steps. She can't move, she broke her back. We don't know. Should we call Atzal? I said, wait, don't call Atzal, I'm coming. And we had a business office next door. I ran over, and I was an EMT at the time. I'm reviewing, the halachas of what to do and so on and so forth, the protocol. And I get there and I asked her a few questions, capillary refill. Okay, she didn't seem terrible, but she was in pain. All of a sudden, the door opens up in the hallway. Who's there? Rabbi Newman. Nuss, what's going on? I said, she fell down a flight of stairs. Should we call Hatzal? He goes, who's it? Rivki. He comes down and says, Rivki, get up and go back to class. I said, Tom, we're going to get sued. We need a board. We got to call Hatzal. We got to do. I got this. Rivki, I'm going to count to 3. Get up. No, my back. No, it doesn't. Get up and go back to class. She jumped up and she ran back to class. He puts his arm around me and he says, son, rule number 1, know your customers. Boom. That was the most incredible chinuch advice in my life. I'm in chinuch close to 40 years. And sometimes tough love works as well. Kind because he cared, but that was also because he cared.
And I think that that's part of the godless of the book. It's not kulei ava. It's not all love and giving.
Right. He could be very tough.
He could be tough, and there's great examples of where he was tough. I think there's a story, maybe one of you could share the story. I think it seems like a class went on strike or something.
Correct.
And he didn't have it.
He walked in, he stared them down for about 3 minutes. They were shaking. He said, and now we can talk. After they were shaking a little bit because they were wrong. A 8th grade class ran away in the snowstorm. Lunchtime, they went to a friend's house 2 blocks away. They came back, and who was waiting for them? And he found out where they were. He didn't say anything. He let them stay. They got guilty. Girls feel guilty. And they came back. He was waiting on the steps. He goes, go to your class. I'll be there in 2 minutes. He went to class, and he was silent. And a few girls started crying because he was silent. They thought he was going to yell at them. He said, girls, I'm responsible for you. Your parents drop you off in the morning. You come by the bus. I'm responsible. If anything happens to you crossing that street, it's on my head. You did something wrong. Don't do it again. He got up and he walked out. No yelling, no nothing. But when he had to be, he was tough. He could have a dining room of 600 girls and scream, you! And point to the back. He wasn't pointing at anybody, and the place was quiet. And there was no talking. That's right, sit down. And that was it. There was nothing to talk about.
Rabbi Krohn, I know that in the book it shares that he created so many unique, tangible, practical, experiential learning experiences. And I know you had the schus of being part of one of those experiences for over 2 decades. Could you bring us into that experience?
Yeah, that's one of the greatest things that I loved about him. And I have a sister-in-law, Mrs. Yocheved Bricks, who teaches the 1st grade. And one year, she asked me if I could come and speak to the 1st grade because they're going to give them their chumashim. And I was thinking, listen, I could speak for high school kids, for adults. What could I do, for the 1st graders? But I had heard a great story about the Rabbi Weltler, who had one time, before he was going to give the chumashim to his class, and that was in Tveres Moshe, there were 25 boys. So he had 25 oranges, and he had them cut up, and each kid got a piece of the orange, and he said to them, I want you to smell the orange. They each smelled the orange. Then he said, now we're going to make a bracha, we're going to taste the orange. And they tasted it. And then he said, what was better, the taste or the smell? So they all said, of course, the taste. He said, before you got your chumashim, you were only able to smell the Torah. Now you're going to be able to taste the Torah. And I did this for 25 years. But before I started, Rabbi Newman would come in and he would give a little introduction because each kid had 2 crowns, because it says by Har Sinai, everybody had 2 crowns. And then he led me to speak, and I told them, why do we have different time zones all over the world? So that every second Torah is going to be learned someplace. And then we sang, Hashem gave us a present, you know what it was, right? And he was there. And then at the end, which was the most adorable thing, and I feel so bad that we don't have a picture of it, is that he would take a Sefer Torah, like, one of these stuffed ones, and I would take it, and we stood in the middle, and all the girls, walked around us, and they were singing Torah, 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 Tzivulanu. And every single year we did it. And he always made time to be there. And it was so precious just to hold his hand, on his shoulder. And we would, walk
Dance
around.
in the middle.
In the middle. And everybody, was around us. And it was such a beautiful thing. And they did it every single year. The first year I did it, my granddaughter, Rachel, was in the class. Now she has a number of children. She's a mother already. And we're still doing it.
And I guarantee you that each one of those 1st graders never forgot that experience.
Never forgot.
Reb Nosson, the book has a very interesting beginning. It kind of starts by not just your parents, but even not just your grandparents, but even your great-grandparents. And there's a fascinating first, 30, 40 pages of the story of how Ramosha got to where he ultimately got to. There's a lot of amazing things in there. It's a standalone story. It's kedai to read that. It's amazing history.
The first chapter is incredible.
It's incredible. You have to share with us the story about when he was during World War I, when he was forced to kill somebody, execute somebody for stealing, and then how that came back with Hashgacha Pratis in World War II. Can you bring us into that?
Absolutely. It was his favorite story to tell, and I heard it 100 times, 200 times, and every time I sat there quietly listening. My grandfather lost his father when he was 3, his mother when he was 5. He lived with his grandfather, Reb Shlomo Zalman, who was nifter when he was 11 years old. He was alone, and the people of Kolomayer in Poland took care of him until World War I started. And then he joined the Polish Brigade. The Polish Brigade, because he was a Polish citizen, and he became a sharpshooter, and he rose in the ranks. He became a captain, or whatever the rank was. They were under the leadership of the German army. However that worked, I can't figure it out, but that's what it was. And one day, he was inside the officers there, and they called him out. Neumann, this guy was caught, a German soldier was caught stealing a loaf of bread. And the halacha was, he has to be shot, he has to be executed. And you're going to do it with your group of guys. We found a picture of my grandfather with his group of guys. Interesting. And he took him out to the forest, and the guy looked at him and said, "Sir, I noticed you daven, you pray, you're different than the rest of the soldiers. I have 3 children at home. I stole a loaf of bread because they're starving. Please have pity on me." And my grandfather, Appa, he looked at his group and he said, "Okay, go, I'm going to do this by myself." They walked further deep into the forest. He took off his jacket. He shot a bullet through it. He cut his arm. He put some blood over it, just like by Yosef. And he gave him a few dollars, whatever the money was. He said, "Go run that way." And the guy took off. He went back. "Okay, I killed him. Here's his jacket. Proof. Good. Shkaya. Good job, Newman." This was 1915, 16. My grandfather got married. He moved to Heilbronn. He married my grandmother, Amma. And in 1937, things were getting not good. 38. One person, the chief of the police, of the SS police, used to visit my grandparents' house. He was the chief of the police, the Gestapo, in Heilbronn. And this was the guy that my grandfather saved 25 years before that, 20, whatever the number was before that.
And he saved them ultimately.
And he came the night they did the Polish Aktion. I believe it was October, I don't know, 27th. And they rounded everybody up. It was a Thursday. And he had come and he said, "Newman, get out quickly, have your papers." And he got rid of everything, and he had a valise with the visas and everything ready to go. And this was a sudden thing. And the next day they were put on a train to go to Stuttgart, where they were going to be sent back to Poland. Anybody with Polish yichus, they didn't want. They wanted Germany to be Polish free. And it went after the father. And everybody was pushing to get out of the police station. And my grandfather said to my father, "Don't push, let's be the last ones." And they were the last ones onto these big trucks, stuffed with people. And they were about to pull off, and all of a sudden a car pulls up in front, and the chief of police gets out. And my grandpa looks at my father and he says, "Moshe was saved." He says, "Neumann, raus!" And the whole family get out. He brings them into the police station. It was Friday night. And the Gestapo needed him to sign a paper. It was Friday night. And my grandfather said, "Can't sign, it's Shabbos." And he looked at the Gestapo, looked at me, "Are you crazy?" He said, all you have to do is sign and you're free." He goes, "I will not be Mechal Shabbos." And the chief of police came and quickly knew he had to do something. The Gestapo people were not the kindest people. He grabbed the pen, he says he's crazy, he lost his mind, he signed his name. The Gestapo left. And this guy looked at my father, the chief of police, and said, "Now we're even, Newman." He goes, "We're not even until I get to America." And they got to America. 1946, 47, they got a letter from a tribunal asking my grandfather to testify on behalf of this chief of police. He was a good guy, no? He was a good guy. And my grandfather didn't know what to do. And they went to the Gadol Hador, Rabbi Yonasan Shteif. Rabbi Yonasan Shteif sat there for a long time. He says, "Mr. Neumann, come back tomorrow. I have to sleep on it." He came back the next day, and he said, "Sheva al tasa, don't do anything. If you get a second letter, Then we'll worry about it. And my grandfather listened to Das Torah, and he never got a second letter. Who knows if he killed 10,000 people? We don't know. But that's one good turn deserves another. He was the one who he saved in World War II, and he saved the family in World War II.
And ultimately, he saved Ramosha,
He
who
saved
saved so many people's lives.
But I want to tell you, I want to add something to that great, great story. When Rav Moshe was a little boy, he was in jail that Thursday.
Correct.
And they were in Stuttgart. Now
This is a great story.
my mechatenista, or my son-in-law's grandmother, Oma Roberg from Detroit, everybody loved her. She was a teacher in Stuttgart, and her husband was in Limudei Kodesh. She taught in Limudei Chayil. They found out that there was a Frum family in jail.
jail.
That was the Newmans. So she went to her Rav and she said, am I allowed to carry, there was no Erev, bring food to them. So a tremendous thing. The Rav said, bring them water and bring them sandwiches. You're allowed to al spikuach nefesh. She added seltzer. And when she came to the jail, they took away the seltzer. And she said she always remembered how you have to listen to a Rav. The Rav said water and sandwiches. And I want to tell you that when she told me this story, and she was in New York, I brought her to Rabbi Newman. I brought her to the Beis Yaakov. He was so happy to see her. He made her go to all the classes and tell the story.
And every time she came into New York,
Yeah.
he had her speak in front of the whole school.
Right. Just to tell how they saved, the Robergs saved the Newmans, in that jail with food.
He had such a uncanny sensitivity, and he was able to pick out whatever everyone needed and whenever they needed it. And that's so special. There's one story in there, like I was crying away when I was reading the story. And Rav Nosson, you could share about what happened in a back stairwell with 3 little third graders when everyone's looking for him and he's just not there.
So it was dismissal time. And Rabbi Moshe Newman led the dismissal, 18 buses. He knew where everybody went on, or which bus, and hold that bus, and this one good. They can't find Rabbi Newman. And he was found in the back staircase on the first floor. There were 3 girls that year who were Yesaimis. And it was the day before the first time they would have to say Yiskar. Now, I don't know I don't know if they should have, maybe the first time they were
supposed to
say Yiskar. And he sat there and he told them exactly what would happen. Everybody's going to go out and you're going to sit there with your mother. And this is what you're going to say. And he said it with them. He made them read it again and again. And I'm sorry, I'm getting choked up. And then he said, I'll be there in 2 minutes. The buses can leave. And the buses left and he came. He goes, I had to do this. By the Shiva, I think I said it by the Levaya, I know of 12 women who got their Yizkar lessons from my father. And they still remember it today. Talking about a sensitivity, that's a sensitivity.
He said Yisker with them?
He
and
said
told them?
Yisker with them so that they should know what's going to happen. It shouldn't be difficult for them.
Traumatic.
And he said you might cry, and that's okay. Cry softly. It's okay. Nothing wrong. And they came back after the Yom Tif and they said, Rabbi Newman, it was exactly like you said. He goes, yeah, correct. And that's chinuch, because he cared.
I want to tell you something that a certain Machanach, a wonderful Machanach, Rabbi Hillel Mandel, what he once told me, we used to daven in Rav Tarabam Shul together, and one Shabbos morning I invited him after the first meeting for Kiddush, and we were talking about being a principal. And he said such an incredible thing. A principal has to cater to 4 different types of people. He has to cater to the students, to the staff, to the parents, and to the board of directors. Now, there are some principals that are great with students, but not so much with teachers. And there's some that are great with staff, but not so much with the students. And there's some that are great with the board, but not necessarily, with the parents. And Rabbi Newman was beloved by every single one of those 4.
You said that in your speech at the Levaya.
Yeah.
I remember it clearly.
Because it's so rare. It is really so rare. I know numerous principals, and they're good, with certain elements, but he was great with everyone. He just had a sensitivity. Now, I remember when the Balabatim in Kew Gardens, Danny Sukenik, Moise Sukenik, Abe Bornstein, Irving Schoenbrunn. These were people that loved him. They worshipped him. And anything that he wanted for them, they were able to give him.
I think Rav Hutner said that, like, between Moshe Zekenik and Rav Moshe Newman, you have Klal Yisrael covered.
He told us.
really?
He
That's
told us. He told it to Avram Fruchthandler.
What did he say exactly?
Really?
He said between Rabbi Moshe Newman and Rabbi Moshe Zekenik, you have Askanas and you have Chinuch covered.
Wow.
Speaking about Rav Hutner was his Rebbe, because I think it's important to point this out. I don't think he ever dreamed as a child that he'd be a mechanech, as a teenager that he'd ever be a mechanech. His parents certainly, that was a nightmare for them.
Actually, his mother.
His mother.
Amma was a yeka through and through. My grandfather harbored inside the hopes that, and when Rav Hutner told him to take smicha, and he says, "What for? I'm going to be a tax lawyer." He went home and he told Appa, and he said, "Moshe, this is why we were saved, so you should get smicha, no matter what you do." So in his heart, he wanted my father to do, I don't know what, but not just to be a tax lawyer. He was thrilled that he got smicha from Rav Hutner and Rav Talushkin. So my grandmother, to the last day, a week before she was nifter, he was in chinuch 40 years. A week before she had a stroke, and she was nifter a week later, he was sitting at the table. He used to buy her groceries. My father, he was he was older already, would buy, he was a man of 50-something years old, would buy his mother groceries. I do the same. I bring my mother Danishes and whatever it is, Baruch Hashem. I learned from the best. And he said, "No, Mama, what do you think? 40 years later, it was worth it that I went into chinuch?" And she was bent over and frail, and she banged on the table. Absolutely not. A mama is a mama is a mama, and that's it. Absolutely not. You should have been, but you had to listen to your Rebbe. And that was the end. A week later, she was.
And Rav Hutner was, you have to read the book because you see how Rav Hutner guided him. There's one moment in there that was so liberating, as somebody who worked in Kiruv and somebody who lived out of town. So Rav Moshe went to Allentown. That was his
Right,
first
right.
major shtetler.
The three of us, his first major shtetl was in
Detroit, okay.
And after he got married, he went to Allentown. The three of us, the three boys, were born in Allentown, Pennsylvania.
So he comes back to Chaim Berlin.
No.
Okay, can you share that?
I'm sorry. There was a girl who came it was a Sunday school part. And one Sunday she came to Sunday school, another Sunday she wasn't there. And my father asked, "Where are you?" He goes, "Well, my father's not Jewish, my mother is. So they allow me to choose what I want to do. So they're showing me what to do. I come to Sunday school one Sunday and I go to church the other Sunday." It bothered my father. It bothered him. We can't have a kid. He went to the chairman of the board. He said, "Rabbi, don't be so religious. The guy before you didn't mind it. Maybe ask your rabbi." And he said, "I can't allow this. You need to either make a choice. You're going to be a Jew or chas v'shalom not." And he went home and he told my mother they had just ordered furniture. He goes, "Put the order on hold. I'm about to be fired." That's what he said. He goes back the next day. "I won't allow it. I'm going to call my rabbi." He called Rav Hutner that night. And Rav Hutner says to him, "Und was hat the Allentowner Rebbe gepaskend?" What did the Allentown Rebbe paskin? He goes, "I can't have her." "Good!" And he slammed the phone down. Isn't that incredible? My father learned from there that even out of town, certain things are a red line. I don't care for $50,000 in 1958. $50,000 was a lot of money. That Hanukkah, he went back, and so that was the whole racquetball.
Story. You have to read the book.
You have to read the thing. It was a great
We
story.
can't say the whole story in the
You
interview.
can't say it all. Chairman of the board, he beat him in a racquetball game. The guy apologized, blah, 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 blah. Good. He said, Hanukkah, he went to get chizuk from his Rebbe, and he walks in, standing in the back on Stone Avenue. And all of a sudden, Rav Hutner spies him, and he goes, "Lots of dorch the Allentown Rebbe. Let the Allentown Rebbe go by." And it's split, the sea split. Father goes, he's sitting on a dais, like mamish, melucha. And he sits down next to him, he goes, "I have a taina to you, Moshe. You didn't tell me what happened." He said, he told him the whole story, he challenged him on board. Rav Hutner took a spud, put it in front of his face, was laughing so hard. And he patted my father on the shoulder. "Moshe, hast du gut getan." And that he took with him the rest of his life, that pat on the shoulder. And then there's another story when he was a bacher, Chatzil Lachem, Chatzil Hashem. That's when Rav Hutner told him, "Moshe, America is nit slabotka, it's nit tells, it's not the mirror. America is America, and we're going to win over the kids with stickball on Pitkin Avenue. That's how you win the children."
And look how many he won over.
And it's interesting because in his early years, he was mostly with boys.
Correct.
And then He became the principal of the girls' school because it was an
1961,
opening.
right.
And look what he built.
Who hired him, Rabbi Krohn? You know the names of the 6 guys: Rabbi Merling,
Merling, and then Schomburn,
Schomburn,
Atlas.
correct, Paul,
Atlas,
correct,
Paul,
and
Danny
Danny,
Sekenik, and
Moise.
Moise Sekenik.
correct?
Yeah, of course.
Best hire they ever did.
Yeah, sure.
L'chaira.
Sorry, Rabbi Newman Jr.
No, absolutely.
There was
absolutely.
another thing that my sister told me. She went back a number of years ago to visit him. It was his last year that he was there.
2010.
And she spent an hour with him.
I remember.
And, he was sitting in the office and talking. This was his first graduating class. And he told her a very interesting story. She had asked him, how did you get the money to start? He said, I'll tell you what happened. I was given the name of a certain person. I didn't know who he was. And I came to his house, and there was a whole line of people in front of me. And, I was waiting, and I overheard how they were talking to this person and all, making him feel very special that he was such a gvir and giving so much money. And finally, it was my turn. I got up to the guy. The guy said, who are you? He said, my name's Moshe Newman, and I need money. I want to build a Beis Yaakov. So he said, do you know me? So he said, no. So he said, so why'd you come here? So he said, because people told me that you're a kind person, that you could give, but I don't know anything about you. And he did not flower the person. And the guy said, I'm going to give you $20,000 because you're the only one that was honest. Most of the guys, they didn't know me, but they were flowering me up and giving me compliments. I knew they didn't mean it sincerely, but you were sincere and you were emes. And in the book, there's a great story, as you mentioned before,
That's a great
about
story.
the emes of his father who wouldn't sign on Shabbos. And the guy said, I'm going to shoot you. And his grandfather opened up his jacket and said, shoot. And Moshe Newman saw that's what emes is. That's what Ehrlichkeit is. You don't bow down to things that are false.
And he had a taina to his father many years later when he was
Yeah.
by Reb Shachna Zon.
Yeah.
He learned in the Rambam that Yareg Val Yava Shloisha
Yes,
Averes.
yeah.
So how could you
Yes,
give up
right,
your life and have
right.
us all killed?
Right.
Reb Shachna Zon said, I don't have an answer, but if your father did it, it came from a real place, and you would have all gone to Gan Eden.
Yeah.
And my father looked at Reb Shachna Zon and said, I'm glad I'm here. But it came from emes.
Yeah, of course.
Came from emes.
Rabbi Newman, what was the ingredient? He cared. That's there. But what's the panemius? Where did literally, if you read the book, there are hundreds and hundreds of Talmidas that many of them now are parents, they're grandparents, and they're still being impacted by him. Where did it come from? And Rabbi Krohn, we're going to give you an opportunity also to answer. What was that midah? If you had to distill it into one quality, two qualities, what did it come from?
I think he was influenced by his youth. He was influenced by the horrors of Kristallnacht. He was influenced, how could another human do this to another human? Then when he came to America, he didn't have an easy time in Tervadas. He had one Rebbe who Nebuch wasn't well and used to smack the kids. And he once took it for a little guy who wasn't well, and he took the beating that this guy should have gotten. I won't go into details. It's not in the book. That's in volume 2 that we can't give out.
That's under the
That's
Maggid's
under,
table.
under the Maggid's table.
Very
Right.
good, Rabbi Krohn.
Very good. What he really said.
That's right.
And these are the things that shaped his life. He learned so clearly what not to do. And he learned, I'll never forget, in my childhood, he defended me twice. Baruch Hashem, he was in Queens. He didn't know most of the things that I did. And and it was good. It was in Queens. I was in Tervadas and Flatbush. Better stay 30 miles away. It's better for me. Twice he came to the school furious when a Rebbe hit me. Don't touch my child. If you want a patch, I'll give it to him. Don't touch my child. And he did it with his grandchildren also. He told my sister once, you march in there, and if you don't march in there, I'm going to march. My grandson, my nephew was Yana Tzatzkel, and he got beaten. Whatever, good. Don't allow any Rebbe to touch your kid. And he drove to Lakewood on a Sunday to speak to the Manal. So he was influenced, I think, in a lot what not to do, and by his Rebbeim, who showed him how to care. I think, I don't know if I'm, I think he was born that way. He was born a giver. He was born Moshe. He was born Moshe, who was a leader. And in the name, Rabbi Krohn, who's Klal Yisrael's Moel, could tell you a lot more than I could. There's a lot in the name of a person. He was a leader. He was a leader of Klal Yisrael.
I mean, it's so right what he's saying. You know, I said this to Hillel Mandel as well. His name is Moshe Hillel. The Gemara says, Shemo Gorim, your name has an influence. And, you know, I was just in Poland, and I was by the Ramoz cave, and at the Ramoz, on his matzeva, it says, Mi Moshe ad Moshe loikom Moshe. So there's something definitely in somebody who's named Moshe, who has he's destined for certain leadership qualities. And he absorbed from his Rebbe. There's a beautiful story, I'm sure it's in the book, about Rav Ruderman on Shabbos when...
Shabbos afternoon.
Yeah.
It's such a great line. It's also the Zainer Rebbe. And
Yeah.
he said to him, he was the only one in Beis Medrash Chazering.
Right.
He said, he went for a walk with him, and he gave him hadracha and a
Yeah.
few things. He said, you should be a Rebbe. He goes, I want to be a tax lawyer. And Rav Ruderman looked at him and said, Nu sollst sein Chocha principal. At least be a principal if you don't want to be a Rebbe.
But Rav Ruderman, my father learned in Israel, and Rav Ruderman could walk into a telephone pole and say, excuse me.
Right.
You know, like he was many times absent-minded. So he was walking and thinking and learning in a Beis Medrash, and the only one that was there in the Beis Medrash on the Shabbos afternoon was Moshe Newman. So instead of continuing, he walked over to him and he said, you know, what are you doing here? Don't you want to rest on Shabbos? And he said, no, I have to chazer. So he said, come, let's walk together. And he walked, and he took a love, and he took an attention for this Talmud who was sitting there alone. And that had a tremendous influence on him, that you isolate one particular Talmud and just make him feel special.
You have to read the book. It's required. It's
Yeah,
required
it's
reading. It's
no question.
And if there's one book I think you're going to buy, it should probably, in addition to all of Rabbi Pesach Krohn's books, obviously, it should probably be this book. It's a great way to go into the Yom Hadin.
Oh, for sure.
To realize what we're capable
Sensitivity.
of accomplishing, and perhaps even more importantly than that, you know, maybe it was an interaction, one interaction, two interactions, and he changed a child for life. And we all have that power within our hands. But I'd like to ask each of you to share one's very favorite story, one moment with
I'll tell you
Moshe.
a great
Moshe.
story. I'll tell you a great story how he zoomed in and got to the kishka of it in a split second. And this story happened the third night of Shiva in my house. A lady walked in, she was in the mid-40s, it was 10:30 at night, and we were going since 7:30. I didn't stop that third day. And then everybody went to Lakewood. And she walked in at 10:30 at night, and she motioned to me, and I got up, and there was 30, 40 people there. And she said, Rabbi Newman, can I speak to you privately? I said, could you wait until people leave? Of course. And I think it was about 11:30 at night, and we went out, and then finally the last person left. My mother didn't want us to say Shiva only till 10 o'clock. She went to bed, but she didn't want us to say, I'm just joking. She didn't want to say it only, let's say somebody can only come at 10:15 and they need to come. We didn't have any times. And it was 14, 15-hour days, 16-hour days for 3 days straight. And I went out onto the deck with this lady and said, you don't know who I am. Please don't ask me my name. I was in 8th grade. It was in December time. And I come from a little bit of a dysfunctional home. And my cousin came from a more dysfunctional home. Our mothers were sisters, and they were both off the wall. And she committed suicide. She was in 10th grade, and she killed herself. And I'm thinking to myself, you know what? Might be a nice answer to this madness. And in the 70s and the 80s, the whole suicide, zach, whatever it was, good. And my father said to her, and he said, let me go speak to Rabbi Newman. Ask him what, he sees my father in the hallway. He goes, Rabbi Newman, do you have a few minutes? He said, what's the matter, Bubala? Everybody was Bubala. And he said, I need to speak to you privately. Good, come to me after you finish lunch. I finish in the lunchroom. I go up and I eat my lunch. Come to my office. I'll give you a note. And she goes up and she looks at him and she starts crying. He says, talk to me. Together we'll solve it. Together we'll solve it. She started crying when she said it to me. Could you imagine? I'm an 8th grader. And he said, together we'll solve it. I'm coming to you for adracha. He said, I want to kill myself. My cousin killed himself. And I live my mother's nuts and this and that. And it was quiet. He looked me in the eye. He goes, no, you don't. I said, what? Yes, I do. No, you don't. And I was so upset at him. Don't tell me how I feel. And he said, I'm not telling you how you feel, what about your husband and your children? What's going to be with them? And she said, I burst into tears. I couldn't sit. He said, why are you crying? I never thought that I would even have a husband and children. And every day after lunch, for 4 weeks, 4 days a week, he spent 20 minutes with me, giving me chizuk, making me feel like $1 million and that I could. And he told me how to deal with my mother, what I'm allowed to say to her, and what I'm not allowed. I don't have to answer to her in certain things. And it came midwinter vacation, I was a new kid. I said, what a great story. He said, wait, it's not over. Over midwinter vacation, I realized I'm not going to have a kesher with Rabbi Newman, the great Manal, anymore. So the first day of school, back from midwinter vacation, I saw him in the hallway. I whispered, I'm having those thoughts again. So he looked at me, goes, no, you're not. Come to my office after lunch. He said, you just need to talk to me. We're going to talk 2 or 3 times a week, every day, every week, to the end of the school year. And that's what they did. He spoke to me every week, 2 or 3 times for 3-4 minutes. You're great, you're chizuk, this and that, whatever it was. And he wrote me a beautiful note. This is what she tells me, and I lost it. And it helped me through high school, and I got married. I live in an out-of-town community, and I flew in because I saw it in the paper that your father passed away. I lost shaykhs. I had to tell you this story. He saved my life. Physically, he saved my life. And she burst into tears. She said, how did he know? I burst into tears. I was crying bitterly. My wife thought, who knows what. And I said, I don't know how he knew, but that was his kayach. Because he cared, because he got to the kishka of it, because he knew kids. That's how he did it.
Remarkable.
Remarkable story.
Rabbi Kroh?
To me, I think that there's something that we didn't touch upon, but I think it's so important. I loved the marriage that he had. His wife was an exceptionally capable person who created 613 Torah Avenue, who was so popular. And, sometimes when, a spouse sees that the other one is very successful, sometimes there's some jealousy or whatever, he's getting all the coverage, she's getting all the coverage. And we know this happens many, many times. He was so proud of what she did, and he encouraged her. And they they had written songs together in the beginning when they first got together. They went to a camp, and they had a mutual talent and a mutual admiration for each other. And to me, that was so special. And I remember when, in the days of cassettes and CDs, the second a CD or a cassette came out, I always sent it to
Record, Rabbi Krohn.
Record.
Yeah.
Okay,
I have all 9 records of 613 Torah Avenue.
Wow.
I listened to that on record, so.
You're not that old.
Yeah. But, I would send them the books, and also always so complimentary, both of them, about each other and, to other people. So to me, she should be gesund and well, but she was such a strong part of his being so kind, and he was so kind to her, and he admired her greatly.
And she hated the limelight. To this day.
Really?
She went to the dinner.
So she's not going to watch this interview?
No, so I'll make her watch it. And which is why I didn't say anything, because she would tell me, I'm so grateful you said something. You didn't have to say anything about me. It was about Tati. So I'm grateful you said something. I really am. Thank you. But she went to the dinner every year, and everybody, oh, Mrs. Newman, we love your husband. Like, which wife wants to hear that? You said at the Levaya, Rabbi Krohn. 4,000 girls wanted to marry Rabbi Newman when they were younger.
Right.
And then as they got older, they wanted to marry somebody just like Rabbi Newman.
Right.
And that's what it was. And she went to the dinners every single year. I don't think she enjoyed it that much, and she went as a chizuk to him. But every morning, he left the house at 7:06. Like a yekka, like anything. At 6:45, when I just got up to go to yeshiva, on the table there was a napkin and a fork and a plate. And as he opened the door coming in from Shachris, she poured the water into his coffee and put it down by his seat. That's what I remember.
I think I'm going to have my wife
day.
watch this.
Yeah, I don't want to say this to anyone. Your wife is going to tell you, there's the coffee and there's the water. But that's what and when he used to write the newsletters, she would work on it the night before, and it was waiting for him there. And he would review it with her, and he says, I don't like the way you write it. So she used to say, so then don't ask me to fix it. If you don't like it. And no, your way is better. And he used to leave at 7:06. He used to pick up a couple of girls in Borough Park, and they were in Queens at 5 to 8, 10 to 8, at 8 o'clock, whatever it was.
Because he cared. and he did. Yasher Koach Rabbi Newman, Yasher Koach Rabbi
What is the
Krohn.
chus?
His legacy should continue.
I
We
thank you
should read
so
it.
much for choosing me. You know,
I want to tell you
come
something.
yeah.
They called me and I said, maybe it's better if you do it with somebody else. I said, of course, Rabbi Krohn. Like, I didn't even think for a second.
And it was
Of
a
course
great
Rabbi
choice.
Krohn.
Yasher Koach.
Of course Rabbi Krohn is coming. Not a Shaila. And that's what it was. Baruch Hashem. You had a special relationship with him.
Thank you so much. We should emulate his ways and Emir Hashem continue to impact Klal Yisrael, like Ksiva Chasim Tova, and a good gebench to the earth.